Hey everyone, today I was working on doing some repairs to a spring system for a client, and I wanted to talk about how to find a spring, especially in central and eastern Tennessee, where you have kind of the foothills and things of the Great Smoky Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains. Most of the topography is going to be really similar to this. And so I was going to talk a bit about how to find a spring, how to find the right kind of spring, what to look for, how to find it easily. So I'm going to flip the camera around here and show you some telltale signs of a spring. I am up on the side of a hill, and you can see some moisture here. You can also see some slate there. That's really important. I'm going to explain why in a minute. Now, I'm about 2/3 of the way up a hill, and that's extremely consistent as far as where I find springs in this area, at least the good springs. You'll also see springs further down a hill, but let me start with this. The concept here is at the top of the hill, you've got soil and then you've got limestone. Both of those are permeable by water. So you're going to get rain falling, hitting the top of the hill, and basically permeating through very slowly, which is really interesting because that means your hillside is effectively working as a battery. Your plateau on the top of the hill, and then anywhere along the hill before you hit the slate layer is working as a water battery. And so even though you may have high rain events or drought events, you're still going to have water coming out because it's taking so long to move its way through all those layers down to the slate layer. Now, when it hits the slate layer, that slate layer is impermeable, and so it's going to find some way of coming out from that layer. So it's going to take the path of least resistance, and that path of least resistance on the slate layer is going to be your spring. In this case, our spring is right over here. I'll show you that in a minute once I explain a few other things. Now, in this case, like I said, I'm about 2/3 of the way up the hill. The reason for that is the slate layer on the hills in this specific region. So again, Middle Tennessee to Eastern Tennessee, pretty consistent, though there may be some deviations in that. As you come up the hill, you're gonna, if you're looking for water or looking for a spring on your property or somebody else's, you're going to come up the hill. And I actually recommend coming up a valley where you know water is washing, because rocks are going to be exposed and you're specifically looking for slate. So as I come up this valley, I'm going to be looking and I'm going to see limestone. It's actually a little bit of granite there. It means something's changing in the stone types. And then I start seeing slate. I come up a little further and I start seeing water. Well, I may not see that immediately in the valley that I'm coming up. Once you see your slate layer, you can then travel either direction on the hillside on what's called contour. So on contour means that you're going at the same, basically the same elevation on the hill. So I'd follow it around like this, rather than climbing the hill or going down, because I've found my slate layer. And where that slate layer is, you're going to follow around on contour, and there may be several springs, so keep that in mind. But as you follow that around, then you're going to start looking for areas that are moist, especially during a dry time. And you follow that water up, and you keep following it up. You can see the dripping here. That's a good indication that there's a spring somewhere above me. So I keep following that up. In this case, I've cleared the spring, and you can see it right here. That's your exit location. And but it may look more like just a hillside like this with leaves and things covering it. So you may have to come down, find where the water is, and start digging up to figure out where your spring is. So in this case, we actually probably have another really small spring right there. I'm not going to go and dig that out because I've got this one to show you. This one's been dug out. And what you can see is this solid slate wall here. And so what's happening is the water, there's a bigger spring to the right here actually as well, but the water here is, you know, it's trickling down, it's permeating through all the layers above it, which are effectively working as a battery. And then, you know, back quite a ways in the hillside, water's just slowly dripping down onto that slate layer, and the slate layer is sloped up slightly, so the water ends up coming this way. So it's all those little drops that accumulate and come out at the same point that give us this spring. So I had to clear that out. In this case, I have not done a full job capturing it because I would build a structure around it to keep things out. But what I did do last year is I diverted the water up there out and around, which gave me a dry space. I pressure washed down to the slate layer through this whole area. Then I poured a slab of concrete with a pipe running through it. That's a 1-inch PVC pipe. And there's a divot that I created in the concrete underneath here. And I left a little bit of the pipe sticking out so that I can put extensions on it. So if I ever did build this out and build like a wall around it, I could build a small extension pipe up and put some kind of filter on it if I wanted to, or do other similar things with it. So I made sure that this pipe is actually sticking up high enough that I can put connectors and things on it. So now that if you've got the water captured, you're going to run that out. And this is a very small spring, but it runs like that all year round. So I decided to capture it since it was there, at least to this extent, so that it could be used maybe down the road for cattle or something. But once you do that, you're going to run this pipe downhill just a little bit and put in something called a spring box. And that's going to be the first location where the water is going to sit in that box, and it's going to be allowed to swirl and slow down, and any heavy sediment is going to drop to the bottom of that spring box. And the bottom of the spring box, which could be, say, a 55-gallon drum, you'll want to have a valve on so you can open that up and drain out debris every few months or so. And then from that box, you're going to run it to a storage tank, and then the storage tank is going to have pressurized pipe all the way down to your location that you want to use the water, with a valve at the bottom, and that way the water can store up into that tank. And as long as there's water in that tank, you'll have consistent pressure down at the bottom of the run. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave those down below. Just hit me up in the comments. I am happy to help people if you have a question that I can answer. Again, this information is somewhat specific to my area, but you can actually use it in other areas. So your part of the country might have hilly regions with springs, and those springs may come out 3/4 of the way up, or they might come out at closer to the bottom of the hill. That's one more thing I wanted to mention, is you may have springs that come out at the bottom of the hill. Typically those aren't great for drinking water. The reason being is that they're not hitting that slate layer, so they're not really the hydraulic battery that the hills are here, because when they're coming out in the valley, usually they're just getting to the bottom of a run of like limestone or something and then coming out. And so those can be either wet weather springs, so they only run when it's wet, or they can run much faster when it's wet and not really be suitable for drinking, or put out so much water that using a capture system, your capture system will be destroyed. So typically, at least around here, those springs at the bottom of the hill are less suitable. It's not that they're not suitable, but they're less suitable for capturing and for water harvesting. So anyways, I hope that helps. Like I said, if you have questions, if you need help with something, if you've done this yourself and have additional comments or tips for people, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Thanks.